Okay, this is my work for assignment 5. We had to do problem 3 in the M5 nonlinear systems notes, which is solve that system using all 5 of these methods. So for the first part, which was the contour plots, I put clear in CLC at the beginning of all my code, and then I started with setting values for x, y, and z with the linspace and just set my z value to 1, which I can change this to change each of the plotted lines on the graphs. This creates a mesh grid for x and y, and then I start defining my system of equations. So this one's f1. This one right here is f2, and this one right here is f3. And I just set everything to one side and equal it to 0. Down here I started creating my contour plots, so I contoured x, y, and f1 in a 0, 0 window. I did the same thing for f2 and the same thing for f3, added labels, a title, a legend, and then set axis equal and the grid on, and then all that. Then if we run the code, you get this graph right here, which if you change your z value, these lines change. But like right here, you can see that where these things kind of intersect, I believe, is where you're looking at your answers. So like x is 0.46, y is almost -1, and then z is like your levels, I believe, right here. So around 0 for that one, around 0 for that one as well. Okay, if we go on to 3.2, this is where we would use the Gauss-Seidel method. So here I define my system of equations, which is the same thing as earlier, setting everything over to one side. Set my initial guesses at 1. Set a tolerance and a max iterations, and then use the for loop for my iterations from 1 to max. Set my old guesses to my x guess, and then set my x guess to equal the f4 of each guess divided by 2, which solves for each value. And then put all this into a if statement. It's just saying if all of this stuff is lower than the tolerance and the absolute value of y is lower than the tolerance. Same thing for z. It'll print a converged after blank iterations, and then I use this stuff down here to display the values. So if I run that, it says down here converged after 29 iterations, and it's 0.424, -0.29, and 0.1398, which are all relatively close to what I got for the contour plots. 3.3 was Jacobi's method. So I pretty well did the same thing, defined a function that included the nonlinear equations in an iterative format using Jacobi's method, initial guess, tolerance, max iteration. Here I set my initial guesses, use my for loop here from 1 to max iteration, set my equations equal to 0 and just gave them a name, like I did up there in the previous one. If statement stating the same thing. If it's below the tolerance, then you can print this converged after whatever value, and then here it updates my values with x new, and then down here displays them. And then here's just my initial guesses for each one. Here's my tolerance, and here calls the actual function to run everything. So if we run that, see we get similar values to before, except after 29 iterations. This time it's 0.4244, -0.2907, and 0.1398. Which, is that actually the exact... Oh, never mind, I ran the wrong code. So it's actually 0.4649, negative 0.5020, and 0.4370 after 25 iterations, which is a bit far off compared to what I got on the other code for this. Each one increases by a large margin. Okay, and this one is Newton's method, which I wrote code for instead of doing it by hand. So I define my Jacobian matrix in the system directly in Newton's method using this function right here. So I set my x equal to my initial guess. Same thing with the iterations here. Set everything each to their own initial guess. Define my system of equations, and then use a vector of function values. I computed the Jacobian here and set them all equal to each differential or second or partial derivative. Set up my Jacobian matrix here, and then solve for the delta value by dividing j by f. Set x new equals to x minus delta. Set up an if statement here to print if it converges, and then update the guess. And then here's just all my tolerance, my max iterations, my initial guess, and my calls the function back, and then all that stuff down there displays it. So if we run that, this code doesn't actually converge, and I don't quite know why. But if we move on to the fifth one, it is using the fsolve function. So it's the same thing. Define a function, set the x equal to x of something, and then define my equations as f of 1, f of 2, and f of 3, and then set them equal to whatever. Here's my initial guess for each x, y, and z, and then use the options optimum set, display iterations, and this displays the iteration details. Set up my fsolve here, display the solution, and then if I go ahead and run that code, I get, wait, here, let's run it again. I get this warning here, and I couldn't actually figure out what was going on. But yeah, this code here, if I got it to work, it should display something similar to this. But yeah, there's my homework 4.